Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pink Nest Podcast. I'm having an amazing guest today with me, Anca, all the way from the States. She's an award-winning speaker, AI strategist, and a 5-time bodybuilding champion. I mean, I'm at awe and at a loss for words. Welcome, Anca. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. Welcome to the podcast. And I'm just so excited to dive in.
Hey, Nika. Well, thanks so much for having me. And to throw things off a little bit there, aside from everything that I do have a production company. It's called Trifan Event Production. I've spent over 20 years in the events and AV production world, working across all types of events and doing all kinds of technical stuff, not just the planning of the event. I hear your dog, but show calling it. And just leading large-scale productions, building event technology strategies. But a lot of the work that I do today actually sits at the intersection of events, leadership, and AI. And I help a lot of the event teams and business leaders rethink how work actually gets done, especially when you're under pressure. Because a big part of what that is, and that comes from my bodybuilding background, and I'm also training for my first Ironman. I was going to say, just to throw things a little out there, right? It's that cognitive load and making the workflows around us, designing those systems to hold under pressure so that we don't get overwhelmed by all the tasks. I posted on LinkedIn earlier this week something that it's kind of like, it gives you this idea of where we are when it comes to AI. So what I posted was just one simple line. Before AI, I had 2 unfinished projects. After AI, I feel like I have 135. Because I constantly keep adding and adding and adding. Yes, AI makes me very productive, but at the same time, I'm literally working in 100 different tabs, constantly switching between them, right? So that's context switching, and your brain, it gets so tired so much faster because of that, because you're constantly trying to multitask at a level that before we weren't necessarily needing to. So aside from that, I also host Events Demystify podcast, which is one of the top event podcasts in the event technology and AI world. And it's all about, hosting this type of real conversations with leaders across the industry about what it takes to run events, what it takes to make decisions, what it takes to run businesses, just like how you're doing. And it's been a very interesting few years, especially in the last few years with the onset of AI and everything, that the good stuff and then the bad stuff and the not so good stuff that it builds to the table. So just a little bit about me. Thank you for having me again. This is going to be a great conversation. I hear you're in Africa. I'm like, that's a little bit of a time zone difference.
Yeah, it took us a while to get on the same page and finally find a time that suits us both. But yeah, I don't have a very podcasting environment, so it's always loud and birds are chirping and dogs are barking and people are walking around. But look, I mean, this is the whole point. The podcast is about life.
Background track.
And the podcast is about life. So this is just how our lives are and my life is. So I don't mind it even a little bit. Let's start at the very beginning. I always like to start with the childhood. How was Anca as a child, and what dreams did you have, and what was your childhood like?
It's funny, Nika. I'm actually in the process of editing my memoir. I started writing this memoir, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I've written the majority of the draft. And then the last 2 years, I've been going back and forth, going back to the draft and then editing it. So right now, I'm in the process of really finalizing the edit so I can publish it this year. And I am in that, those chapters where it takes you back to the childhood, the early signs, the early dreams, and sometimes it's hard to go back there because you're really removed from that reality. And there's things and memories that you don't want to revisit. So for quite a bit of time, I've been very much procrastinating going back to my draft because I'm like, I don't want to go back there, you know. One thing that I would say about my childhood, I grew up really fast because I grew up in Romania under not, you know, easy conditions. I was born under the communism. I have memories, like very vivid memories, what that was like. And responsibility showed up very early. And there wasn't a lot of room, you know, to be soft about it, to process your emotions, to let's talk about it. You know, it's like I have those conversations with my kids now. At the end of each day, we unpack, you know, what the day was like, what was, you know, things that happened during the day, what were some of their fears, so they can talk it out, so they don't carry with them, you know, into the next day and the next day. I don't have none of that. I'm the oldest of 10. So as you can imagine, when there's a large family around you, there's basically, you're constantly in some kind of a survival mode. May that be emotional, may that be physical, you know, around the environment is constantly loud and noisy and there's no time to process. So that really shaped me. And I think that also shaped me into someone of being extremely disciplined with the things that I wanted to get done, because if I wasn't, they weren't going to get done. So while that was more like survival first, then it turned into a habit later. So as a kid, you know, I was very much drawn to two things: performance and control, right? I love being behind the scenes. I love the idea of computers and technology, and also having a voice. That's where, you know, radio came in. I worked in radio throughout high school and college. I spent a lot of time behind the mic, but also, you know, playing with a audio mixer. And that's what kind of like formed me into wanting to learn more about production, about sound engineer, about video production, lighting, all of that. And it's, you know, the little things along the way that turn you to become the person that you are today. So if I look back now as I am, you know, as I'm editing this memoir, I feel like the thread is very obvious. I wasn't always building something, but I was always looking forward to the next big thing. And that's why I'm very much tied into the latest technology, into AI, into what's happening in the world, because I've always had that curiosity, what's out there. That's what pushed me outside of my environment. When I was right after college, I was like 20. I had $100 and something in my pocket, and I packed a suitcase and I left for US on my own. And I was like, I need a better life. I want to have my own agency of what my life will turn out to be, versus what my parents kind of had in mind, which was like, let's get her married and get her out of the house. You know, that wasn't really my plan. And I wanted to have more agency over that.
We have quite a lot of in common, to be honest, because I grew up in Yugoslavia. I was born in Yugoslavia, so that's very much similar to where you grew up with. And yeah, it was definitely, I mean, childhood was very much different from what we are used to today. And also I worked in a radio station as well.
I love it. Oh my gosh, there's so many things we have in common.
And also on a television company.
Too.
Yeah, and also on a television company. So it's interesting. Yeah, we have a lot of in common, and also in terms of technology and everything. So I find it very interesting. But one thing we don't have in common, I have nothing to do with bodybuilding. So I want to hear that story.
Definitely. I think for me, bodybuilding found me at a time when I really needed structure more than motivation. This was right around COVID when it hit. And, you know, a lot of my business is built around events, for events to happen, and events happen in person. So when everything shut down, basically the majority of not just my work, but my identity of who I am, if I am not what I do, was shattered to pieces. So that's sort of like when going back to that idea of control, even though, you know, at the end of the day, like, what control do we really have? Like, it's more of a, you know, feeling than an actual thing. The only thing that I could control during that time was like myself. And I knew that for me, I needed to have something, a project to work on. And since I didn't have any more events, I didn't have any more projects, I turned it into me becoming my own project. So I started, going consistently into the gym, working, through my emotional weight of what this new world was like. But as I was working through that in my head, I was putting rap under the barbell, So it's one of those few disciplines that I feel like you can't really hide, because the work that you put in is what it shows. And if you don't put the work, it doesn't show, right? And there's no shortcut. Yes, you could use, enhancement and performance enhancement drugs and whatever. But if you're a natural athlete, as I am, there is no shortcuts. You have to put in the time to see results. And there's no negotiation. There's no excuses. There's no way about talking yourself out of it. So that what gave me a lot of honesty, physical honesty, right? You either did it or you didn't. There's like no in between. And mentally, it gave me that level of control that I was looking for, because in an industry where there were so many variables at a time that were outside of my control, then bodybuilding became the one place where effort and outcome were very much linked. And then one thing led into another. One of the trainers at this gym that I was going to noticed that I was making a lot of progress, and kind of planted the idea of like, hey, did you ever consider competing? And I'm like, no, like who in their right mind would show up on a stage in a skimpy bikini and welcome everyone's criticism on this one body, which we call the package that I build. I'm like, no. But then, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I am kind of competitive by nature. I'm like, why not? I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? So I remember my first show, it wasn't really about the win. It was more about the proof that I could commit to something fully and then see it through, even when it got uncomfortable, even when it got boring and repetitive and hard and I didn't feel like it, right? So what that really taught me was that consistency beats intensity every single time. And that changed kind of like how I approach everything in business, in the projects that I work on, in leadership. You stop kind of chasing those big moments, and then you just start building the systems that can hold under the pressure. But more than anything, it's the work behind the scenes that shows, that reveals itself in this one big moment. But a lot of people, they just want to live for the big moments, right? And they don't want to work behind the scenes, because that's like, again, that takes a lot of discipline, that takes a lot of consistency. But that's the important work. Like I just released an episode for my birthday last week, and I was talking about that work, the work that's hidden, the work that nobody sees. Like it doesn't make it on a LinkedIn post or a social media reel, but you do it day in and day out. And sometimes you're wondering, like, will that work matter? And bodybuilding taught me that if this one person that looked like this could turn into this one person that is completely changed her body recomposition. There's like a difference, like day and night, between what I was before and what I am now. And all of that happened by putting in the work day in, day out for years. Then yes, there's hope for anyone to change, no matter what that looks like in your life, because it doesn't always have to be physical, right? Like we're talking about addictions, we're talking about biases, we're talking about emotional baggage that we carry with us, all of that stuff.
It's interesting because we have another thing in common. So same as you, I mean, I didn't end up in bodybuilding, but same as you, I mean, I think the people listening, because we do talk a lot about events in my podcast, are really still not aware how impactful the COVID and the whole pandemic was for the event industry, because during literally, at least this was in Europe and the UK, during one night, we stayed without everything. So we stayed at home. There was no work. There was no idea even when we can start working again. And we found ourselves locked behind the doors with people whom you usually don't spend that much time with, like your family, your close ones, which are usually spread all around, working on their own projects, their own work, and so on. So people are, I think, yes, they're still not aware how challenging it was. And a lot of good things actually came out of this. And I'm super happy to hear that your story is one of those. For me, it was similar because the company that I'm, like Calmness Collective and everything that I do in terms of well-being and mental health and everything somehow spiraled out of the pandemic as well. So
Yeah,
I'm really
because
happy.
people had
Yeah.
to go inwards to start to like look at themselves and be like, oh my gosh, I need to live with this person and I can't hide behind the business of work.
Yeah, it's somehow our identities are always tied with what we do, right? I mean, in one way or another, even we want to admit it or not. But still, I think work, particularly like we are, because we are like founders and entrepreneurs, and you're very personally also connected with what you do. So we are not working for multinational companies like one of the employees, but it's your company. It's very much different. You're very much connected to it as well personally. I think identity is a big part of this. And once this is taken away, I mean, not physically in terms of you still have your company, but you can't work. So it was really, really, I mean, as I said, it was really challenging, but a lot of good things also came out of it. Now, I mean, 6 years, I still can't believe it's 6 years already, but still now 6 years later, you can do a little bit of a reflection. And I hear a lot of people saying, coming from events industry, particularly saying, or creative industries in general, those who could not work, saying, you know what, it was not all that bad. I mean, some good things happened as well. And I'm glad to hear what your story is one of those as well.
Well,
Really glad to
absolutely.
hear
Because
that.
I mean, for me, it was the onset of this new way of doing events, right? Like when we talked about virtual events and hybrid events and all of that, there wasn't a new concept for me because if you think about the fact that I streamed my own wedding on the internet in 2009, like many, many years prior to COVID, because my family couldn't come to US. And even though they applied for visa, you know, all that immigration story time, they couldn't. So then I had to sort of like bring them into this celebration, even though they were thousands of miles apart. So yeah, a lot of that came because of COVID. Like we had to reinvent ourselves. We had to figure out how to do events in a new format. And we ended up being very successful in this new
And also
environment
very creative because we had
and
to be.
creative because I mean
Yeah.
what is innovation, right? Like innovation basically gets built from like from the need of having to figure things out, and I think that's kind of like, you know, the birth of innovation. Like I have to figure this out, I have to make it work, right? And I love when that happens. How many lessons do we still remember? That is something that, especially in the event industry, we still grapple with. Like we've learned a lot of things during that time, and sometimes I feel like we just went right back to our old habits. And we need to be reminded sometimes that, hey, we actually done things differently and it worked, and it was, you know, a very you know, hard season, but also a very exciting season because of the possibilities that it brought. And we can't just leave those lessons behind. We have to be reminded so we don't go back to our old ways, like nothing happened, and we're just gonna keep doing what we used to do prior to that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's super important we keep this in mind, like you said, because I think the exposure still is, I think people should not forget what happened. And also having this in mind that, you know, a lot of your livelihood, let's put it like this, is somebody else's hands. Because nobody is guaranteeing you something like this will not happen again. Maybe in different format, but still. So I think this creativity that spiraled out of it should not be forgotten in any case. I mean, no way. I think that
And
we should build
especially
on this
now,
as
right,
well.
Nika, with AI being like this, you know, doom and gloom for creatives. Because a lot of creatives they do fear, like, is AI gonna replace me? Like there's like AI generation model that do so much better and so much faster output. Where do I stand as a creative in this, you know, new workflow? And I think there's always room for that human creative mind that cannot be replaced with AI. I mean, I fight with AI tools all day long because I can't get the output that I really want. And I'm really good at prompting it properly, but you can tell when you're hitting that limit, like you're hitting a wall. Like
Mm,
AI has been trained on so much data, but yet it can't produce original content. It can only read patterns that it's been trained on and then try to produce something from there, right? Like you're trying to produce something out of chaos. But
mm,
the creative mind, what we have, it's something that can come up with like this idea out of nowhere and makes sense. And it doesn't repeat itself again and again. And that's kind of like where the humanity of it all, it's so important in the age of AI. It's
mm,
very passionate about because yes, I'm all about systems. Yes, I'm all about workflows. I'm all about patterns and making things work in an organized fashion, but not without that human in the loop. But it's the human with AI in the loop. Like AI will
mm,
definitely help you become a more rounded person. Like I've learned so much in the last few years on things that I would have never spent time learning on. Like I'm a developer. When was the last time I actually developed code and I built an AI app? Guess what? I did it in the last year, right? Like I do things that my mind is blown because now I can. I have the capacity to.
mm,
But I would have never thought of myself to be like a software developer. Guess what? I could be. If I wanted to be like a historian, all I have to do is prompt an AI really, really well and get me all the research that I
mm.
needed, writing a paper or who knows what, right? It does
Yeah.
unlock capacity, but you shouldn't forget how important it is, like your context, your domain expertise, your thoughts, your thought leadership. And that's what stands out in our world where, most of the posts that you see online now, you're like, they're all AI generated. Like I can't tell the difference anymore.
Mm. True, true. Very much true. It's also interesting. I mean, AI is here to stay. We are. I don't think it's ever going away.
Yeah.
And this revolt in some people's minds or behaviors, like I think that, like you said, I think it's super important that you use it in a way that's beneficial for you, and just expand your knowledge or whatever you want to do with it. But I think just expanding the horizon is I think the silver lining in everything, because not everything is good, obviously, and it can be used for various not all so good things as well. And yeah, probably some jobs will be lost in this matter as well, particularly when things develop. But still, I think it's all about the silver lining that it can do good to you
Yeah.
as well, to
It's
every
used for
single
good,
person.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk just a little bit about your Fit for Events framework, which is
Mhm.
something I found really interesting,
Yeah.
which fuses somehow fitness discipline with event leadership. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit more about this.
So, I was doing events. I'm also doing a lot of AI strategy, technology, and I'm very much deep in bodybuilding prep for my shows. And in my mind, I remember I was on this retreat beginning of 2024 with a group of women from the event industry. I think it was like 14 of us. And we were on a cruise and it was wonderful. Like we had this time for ourselves and we are in open water, no connection to the Wi-Fi in the world, right? And we're just working through our, different topics. Like, we're all building businesses. We're all trying to solve things. And in my mind, I'm grappling with this dilemma: like, how do I combine the things that I'm most passionate about in a cohesive manner so people understand when I come and speak or I come and try to describe what I do, that those are all four different things that I care about. And one is AV production. My company produces events. We're still very much strong on that. The other one is AI technology, like all the things that we do with the workflows, with the strategies, with the teaching and education, all of that. But then there's also this other parts where I care about wellness. I care about mental and physical and emotional wellness. And I'm an athlete that lives those things on a daily, right? So, and then to combine all of that, I care about what happens to the people around me, the audiences that I talk to, the team behind my production company, the people that I work with, right? So all of those four things, like how do I embed it into a framework? So that's when it's like I came up with this Fit for Events framework, because that connection sort of like clicked for me when I realized that I was using this mental framework in both of my worlds, the professional world, but also the professional, the basically personal life. So like in bodybuilding, you're very much managing energy and recovery and output and long-term performance, right? Whereas in events, you're doing very much the exact same thing, only the themes are people instead of muscles. So Fit for Events was about recognizing that performance isn't just physical or just operational. It's both mental, it's emotional, it's physical, and it's technical. So, for example, if your team that you work with or it's working on your behalf is exhausted, your event won't go well. If your systems that you work under are broken, no amount of motivation will save you, you know? So the way I train is the same way how I operate. So the way I am disciplined in my training is the same way how I want to lead. It's with intention, it's with structure, it's with discipline. And all of that came out of this one framework that is very much guiding those four pillars that I care about. Because when you think about leading in this industry, the event industry, it's all about making decision, and there's not always enough time, or there's not always enough information or the perfect condition to make sure that whatever decision you're making is a sound decision. So if you can, out of all of that, protect your team while you're still deploying these solutions with these decisions with the little information that you have, and you're able to also set boundaries around, you know, what is okay to do, what we need to pull out of, what we should say no to. All of that takes a lot of grit, and it takes discipline, right? Because you're a business owner, you want to keep growing, but at the same time you also have to be aware that you are at the, you know, mercy of your team, and if you can take care of them, and if they burn out, then no matter how hard you try to build something, you still need people around you to make sure that that builds well. So that's kind of like where that came from. And it's all about applying what I'm learning basically under the barbell to my business, to my events, to the leadership that I lead, and the workshops and the keynotes and all of that. That's kind of like where I could put this, you know, branding over it and say, this is what it means, and this is what it does for me.
Yeah, to be honest, I can see a lot of importance in mental, but also physical well-being and strength and fitness and everything connected to it in events. I think there are a lot of patterns that could match perfectly. Time is really running. I can't imagine we're already half hour in. I have just one more question. So we know that the events industry is notoriously demanding on everything, on well-being, on energy, high pressure, long hours, everything. For someone that's just starting in events, what do you want them to hear from you today? Tell them, like in one sentence, for somebody that's really starting out.
It's a hard one, but it's a good one. If you're brand new and you're getting into this industry, yes, it's all the things you just said are true. Long hours, constant pressure, always being on. And that's very easy to burn out. And you don't even realize that you do it until it's too late. It's happened to me. It's happened to many others. So I think the one piece of advice I would give you is you don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to get honest about what is not working. And if you're just starting out, focus on learning how things work, not just how they look from the outside. And that's important because you do want to have some hands-on experience on whatever it is that, you know, that you want to do more of. But do keep in mind, you know, like going back to the mental, physical, emotional fitness that we talked about, if you're burning out, it's important for you to recognize that first, so you have the awareness and you have the ability to voice it. And don't be afraid to do that. Like, there's so much toxic leadership sometimes around, like, yes, I'm working like 18-hour days. I used to work 18-hour days, and I was afraid to always say I'm working too much and like I need a break, because you're just starting out, right? Don't be afraid to step out, to simplify, and just reassess. Does this work for me? Because yes, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do so many things. You're not behind. You're just being asked to evolve consistently, and you have to conserve your energy in order to do that long term.
Thank you so much. I think this is really a valuable advice for everybody coming, but also for people who are already in the industry. I think it's also valuable because we tend not to do this, what you mentioned. Anca, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm super glad that we finally found each other and online and somehow matched the timing, which is completely different. Thank you so much. And wishing you a lovely rest of the day. And of course, best of luck with your events and everything else that you're doing. I think super exciting times.
Same to you, Nika. You're doing amazing work. Keep up with what you're doing. And definitely keep me posted when this comes out live so I can amplify it.
Thank you.